During family game night, my fiancé's dad asked why she was settling for me. She smiled and said, because no one else would marry him. I just put down my cards. A month later, they were asking if I'd talk to her again. The game was Monopoly, which was ironic, considering I was about to lose everything I thought I was building. We were at my fiancé Lauren's parents' house for their weekly family game night. It was a mandatory event. A cornerstone of their perfect family image. I was sitting between Lauren and her father, Gregory, a man who wore his disappointment in me like a well-tailored suit. Lauren's best friend, Sophie, was there too, practically a family member. She and Lauren were giggling about something on their phones while Gregory was counting his fake money with the seriousness of a Wall Street banker. He landed on my property, Boardwalk, with a hotel on it. I told him he owed me $2,000. He sighed dramatically, peeling off the colorful bills. Then he looked across the board at his daughter, my fiancée. Lauren, I just don't get it, he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Look at this guy. He's a decent earner. I'll give him that. But he has no style, no pedigree. Why are you settling for him? The air in the room went still. It wasn't the first time he'd made a comment like this, but it was by far the most direct. I felt that familiar tightening in my gut, the one I'd learned to ignore. I looked at Lauren, expecting her to defend me, to shut her father down. Instead, a slow, coy smile spread across her face. She reached over, patted my hand, and looked right at him. Because no one else would marry him, she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. Someone has to take care of him. Sophie burst out laughing, a shrill, ugly sound. Lauren's mother gave a little titter of amusement. And Gregory just smirked, that satisfied I told you so look on his face. They all saw it as a joke. A funny little jab at the quiet, unassuming guy they had all grown to tolerate. I didn't say a word. I looked down at the cards in my hand, at the little plastic hotel on Boardwalk. I felt no anger. No sadness. It was the kind of clarity you get when a complex equation finally solves itself. For 3 years, I had been running a cost-benefit analysis on this relationship. And her words were the final definitive data point. The investment had soured. The risk now far outweighed the potential reward. I calmly placed my cards face down on the board. I think I'm done playing for tonight, I said, my voice even. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and got a glass of water. Through the doorway, I could hear them resuming their game. My absence barely registering. They thought I was pouting. They had no idea. I was liquidating my assets. Let me explain. I'm not a simp. I'm a private equity investor. My entire career is built on a single skill. Identifying undervalued or mismanaged assets, acquiring controlling interest, optimizing their operations, and then selling them for a massive profit. I analyze systems. I find weaknesses. I execute long-term strategies. 3 years ago, I applied that same skill set to my personal life. I met Lauren at a charity gala. She was beautiful, charming, and she came from a family with a legacy business, a regional manufacturing company called Carter Dynamics. Her father, Gregory, had inherited it from his father, and it was the source of all their wealth and social standing. After a few dates, she invited me to her parents' house for dinner. Gregory spent the entire evening talking about his company, but the more he talked, the more I realized he was a terrible businessman. He was coasting on his father's reputation, making sentimental decisions instead of smart ones, and completely blind to the changing market. I did a deep dive. I spent a week of my own time analyzing Carter Dynamics from the outside. The company was an absolute diamond in the rough. It had a solid product line, a loyal customer base, but it was being horribly mismanaged. Outdated technology, inefficient supply chains, a bloated management structure. It was bleeding money, but its core assets were incredibly valuable. With the right leadership, it could be turned around and sold to a national competitor for a fortune. So, I formulated a 5-year plan. Step 1, acquire the key asset, Lauren. Step 2, integrate into the family structure. Step 3, gain Gregory's trust and a seat on the company's board. Step 4, execute a complete operational overhaul. Step 5, facilitate a strategic acquisition by a larger firm, making myself and the family incredibly wealthy, securing my future. Lauren was the entry point. The relationship was my cost of acquisition. I knew from the beginning that she and her family were shallow, materialistic. I tolerated the constant subtle digs about my background because I grew up in a working-class family. I tolerated Gregory's condescending attitude. I tolerated Sophie's snarky comments and her role as Lauren's enabling, parasitic sidekick. I paid for the lavish dinners, the surprise designer gifts, the weekend getaways. I played the part of the devoted, slightly out-of-his-league fiancé. It was all a calculated business expense, an investment in a much larger prize. But her comment during that game night changed the entire equation. It was a public declaration that she saw me not as a partner but as a charity case. It revealed that she had no respect for me, which meant I would never gain the influence needed to execute my plan. The core asset was flawed. The deal was dead. And when a deal goes bad, you don't just walk away. You mitigate your losses. And if necessary, you initiate a hostile takeover of the competition. They saw me as a pawn in their game. They were about to find out I was the one who owned the entire board. Update 1. The week after game night was a study in strategic silence. I didn't mention the incident. I was perfectly pleasant, but I was distant. I created space between us, a professional buffer. When Lauren asked what was wrong, I told her I was preoccupied with a complex new deal at work. That was true. The deal was the complete dismantling of her family's world. They thought my quietness was weakness. I overheard Lauren on the phone with Sophie, saying I was in one of my moods. That she'd have to cheer me up with a shopping trip. They thought I was a simple machine that could be placated with shiny objects. That arrogance was their greatest vulnerability. And I was going to exploit it. My first move was to secure my own position. Lauren and I lived in a condo I owned outright. She had moved in 2 years ago. One Saturday while she was out with Sophie, I created a complete photographic and itemized inventory of every single possession in that condo. I documented what was mine, what was hers, and what was jointly acquired. Then I met with a lawyer, one who specialized in high-conflict divorces and corporate litigation. He reviewed my documentation and the prenuptial agreement I had insisted on, one Lauren had laughed at but signed. The prenup was ironclad. It protected all my pre-existing assets, including the condo and my investment portfolio. Legally speaking, our engagement was a very clean break. Next, I turned my attention to Carter dynamics. For the past year, I had been discreetly gathering internal data on the company. Gregory, in his arrogance, had often asked me to look over financial reports seeking my praise for his supposed business genius. I had saved every one of them. I knew their suppliers, their clients, their debt structure, and their operational weak points better than he did. Now, it was time to use that information. Carter Dynamics' biggest weakness was its reliance on a single supplier for a critical raw material. Let's call them Summit Resources. Gregory had a long-standing relationship with Summit's owner, but it was built on golf games and expensive lunches, not sound business practices. From my research, I knew Summit was being squeezed by rising costs and looking for new, reliable partners. I leveraged my own network. I arranged a meeting with Summit's CEO. I didn't mention Carter Dynamics. Instead, I presented him with a deal on behalf of a different company in my portfolio. I offered him a long-term contract with a 10% price increase over what Carter was paying, guaranteed order volumes for 3 years, and payment terms that were twice as favorable. It was an offer he couldn't refuse. He signed. Summit gave Carter the standard 60-day notice. Gregory wouldn't know it yet, but the heart of his company had just been ripped out. The second pillar of Carter was their largest client, a national retail chain that accounted for nearly 40% of their revenue. I knew from Gregory's reports that Carter was frequently late on deliveries, and their quality control had been slipping. The client was unhappy, but they stayed out of convenience. So, I made it less convenient. I put together an anonymous dossier with Carter's late delivery statistics, rising defect rates, and a financial analysis showing their fragile cash flow. I sent it to the head of procurement at the retail chain. I also included a list of 3 alternative manufacturers, companies I had small silent stakes in. I wasn't just sinking Carter's ship. I was redirecting their lifeboats to my own ports. Meanwhile, I handled my personal life. I found a new, larger condo and signed the lease. I scheduled movers for a day I knew Lauren and Sophie would be gone at an all-day influencer brunch. The final piece was our wedding. We were 4 months away. Deposits had been paid, venues booked, caterer selected. The biggest expense was the venue, a historic hotel ballroom that cost a fortune. I had put down a $50,000 non-refundable deposit from our joint account. I called the hotel coordinator. I told her to cancel the wedding but not the booking. I told her to convert it to a corporate awards gala for one of my companies. Same date. Same budget. Same contract name, mine. Instead of the Lauren and Daniel wedding, it was now the Stratos Capital Annual Achievement Gala. With all traps set, I just had to wait. Lauren remained blissfully unaware. She was more concerned with flower arrangements and bridesmaids' dresses. One evening, she came home with a stack of wedding magazines. Tossed them on the table. "It's all so much work," she said. "Sometimes I think you don't appreciate the effort I'm putting into planning our future." I just looked at her. Nodded. "I'm sure it's very stressful." The beautiful, oblivious architect of her own destruction. Update 2. The first sign of trouble hit Gregory about 10 days later. Lauren came home in a panic. Her father had called, raging. Summit had sent the termination letter. He couldn't understand why his old friend had betrayed him. He blamed the economy, the government, everything but himself. "Dad is so stressed," Lauren said, pacing. "This could be a huge problem for the company. Can you believe it?" I made sympathetic noises. Inside, I felt cold satisfaction. Without Summit, Carter's production would grind to a halt in 60 days. A week later, the second bomb dropped. Their biggest client sent a letter, placing their account under review for supply issues and quality control. The panic was real. Gregory called a family emergency meeting and insisted I be there. He thought my investor brain could fix decades of his incompetence. The atmosphere was grim. Gregory looked 10 years older. Lauren and her mother hovered around him, wringing their hands. "It's a coordinated attack," Gregory said. "Someone is trying to destroy me." He looked at me, eyes pleading. "Daniel, you understand this world. What do I do?" This was my moment. "Gregory," I said, calm. "From what I see, the company is facing catastrophic failure. You've lost your supplier. You're about to lose your client. Your cash flow is already negative. The situation is critical." I walked him through his terrible options. Then I laid my trap. "There is one other option," I said, letting it hang. "You could seek a private investor. Someone with capital and expertise. It would mean giving up a controlling interest, but it's better than bankruptcy." A flicker of hope appeared. "Do you know someone?" he asked. "I might," I said. The investor was me through a shell company I controlled. My plan wasn't just to destroy them. It was to pick up the pieces, for pennies on the dollar. The Saturday of the brunch arrived. Lauren and Sophie left early, chattering about mimosas and networking. As soon as they were gone, the movers arrived. In 4 hours, everything I owned was packed and loaded. I left Lauren's possessions untouched. But the absence of my things created a hollow emptiness in the condo. I left my keys, a copy of our prenup, and a cashier's check for half the wedding fund on the kitchen island. Also, a letter. "Lauren, our engagement is over. As you can see, I have moved out. Per our prenup, assets remain separate. The enclosed check represents your half of the wedding fund. All deposits and bookings were in my name and are now my property. Any further communication should go through my lawyer. Daniel." That evening, I got a stream of furious texts. Lauren called me a monster, a coward, a thief. Sophie threatened to expose me online. I screenshot, sent them to my lawyer, and blocked them both. The silence was golden. The next day, Gregory called me. Voice low, furious. "What is this? You left my daughter. We have a wedding to plan. I need your help with the business." "Gregory, the engagement is over," I said. "As for the business, my offer to find an investor still stands. But the price will be 51% ownership transferred to the group I represent. That's the only offer. You have 48 hours. I could hear him choking on rage. But he had no choice. It was either give up control, or watch his father's legacy crumble. Checkmate was in sight. Final update. It's been 3 months. The aftermath was exactly as I designed it. Gregory signed over 51% of Carter Dynamics to my holding company, never realizing he was handing it directly to me. The day the deal closed, I walked into Carter's boardroom, introduced myself as the new majority owner, and fired him. I fired his entire crony team. The look on his face, pure shock, dawning horror, was worth more than any sum. I began implementing the turnaround plan immediately. We renegotiated with Summit at a higher cost, short-term, but manageable. I flew out to meet Carter's biggest client, showed them the recovery plan, and offered discounts. They stayed. The company, under my control, was saved. Within a year, it'll be twice as profitable. In 2 years, I'll sell it for 9 figures. Their personal lives collapsed. Lauren couldn't afford the condo. She moved back with her parents. Gregory had a breakdown. The family house went on the market. Lauren's social life crumbled. Sophie and the others weren't interested in someone who couldn't afford brunch. Their friendship was transactional, and the transaction was over. Sophie tried a smear campaign online. My lawyer sent a cease and desist so aggressive she deleted her entire account. About a month after I left, the calls started. First from Lauren's mother. Then from Lauren herself. Tearful voicemails. Apologies. It was just a joke. I didn't mean it. Please, let's start over. Finally, a family friend reached out, asking me to meet. I agreed. We met at a coffee shop. Lauren and Gregory looked defeated. Gregory apologized. Begged for a role back at the company. Lauren cried. Asked for another chance. I let them finish. Took a sip of coffee. You seem to think this was about my feelings, I said. That an apology can fix it. It can't. I turned to Gregory. This was a business transaction. I saw a failing asset. Your disrespect proved you were unreliable. So I switched from a merger to a hostile takeover. You didn't lose your company because I was angry. You lost it because you were a bad CEO. Then to Lauren. You weren't my fiancé. You were my cost of acquisition. A price I was willing to pay for access to the real prize. But your comment revealed a flaw in the asset. You were a bad investment. So I cut my losses. I stood. They stared at me like I was a stranger. And in a way, I was. They had never seen me. Only the role I played. I hope you learn from this, I said, leaving a $20 bill for the coffee. Always know the true value of your assets. And never underestimate your competition. I walked out. Never looked back. The last I heard, Gregory and his wife had moved into a rental. And Lauren had taken a low-level office job. They lost everything.